Welcome to Beyond Transcripts, the podcast for educators who want to meet and exceed best practices in transcripts and education management. Being organized is hugely important for homeschool families. So today, Matt Bass, founder of Transcript Maker, and I talk all about organization and some tips and tricks for how to keep your home and your records organized. Both students and parents can take responsibility so that you're not scrambling for where are my books, where are my materials, or what classes did I take 3 years ago when I started high school. All of that is really important to keep track of, and we talk about how and why you can do that. We also share about how Transcript Maker can help keep your transcripts on track so that you're not scrambling at the end when your student is ready to apply for high school. So stick around for fantastic tips and tricks for how to keep yourself organized, both your space and your records, on this episode of Beyond Transcripts. Once again, we are back with Matt Bass, founder of Transcript Maker. Matt, how are you today?
I'm doing great, Sarah. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. We are going to cover a topic that I love to think about. I'm not so good in terms of action, but we are talking about organization and record keeping, which I think is such an important topic for everyone, but especially our homeschooling families.
Absolutely. I mean, everyone needs to be organized, right?
Yes. So let's talk specifically, why is organization so important for a family that homeschools?
Well, you need to keep, you need to know if your student is on track or not. So you need to keep track of the courses they're taking, the grades they're earning. You need to have kind of a roadmap, a plan for their homeschool experience. I mean, regardless of whether you end up homeschooling them through high school or not, you still need to know, where they're at. It depends on the state you're living in, but a lot of states require a certain amount of reporting from homeschool families. So it really helps to have your records well organized. So if the state needs to look at something, you have it right there.
Right. That's always the worst, I think, when you realize you need something or you need to report some information, taxes comes to mind. And then you're like, I got to put it all together and where are all the different pieces?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And, it's just going to add additional stress and anxiety to your life if your stuff is not very well organized. So, just take a little bit of time to do that, and it'll eliminate a whole lot of stress. Especially at graduation time. If you do end up homeschooling through high school, you're going to need all that data at graduation time, what courses they took and what grades they got to create a transcript. And just trying to go based on your memory is not a good idea.
Right.
We get emails all the time from people who are like, well, my kid is graduating and I'm building a transcript, but I can't remember the courses that were taken or the grades. Like, can I just make stuff up? No, you can't make stuff up.
Oh my goodness.
If you can't remember what he did, then that's a bad situation I wouldn't want anybody to be in. So, So get this straight up front.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it makes sense that, like you said, if you're homeschooling your child in elementary school all the way through high school, I mean, that's a lot of things to keep track of, right? And then as you get into high school, you need to know their courses and their grades, and then those need to be compiled in your transcript. There's a lot of official information that needs to be passed on that you're responsible for keeping track of. And then I know as a parent, it's hard to retain really anything, it seems, these days. So don't trust your memory. There needs to be some sort of process and way that you keep track of everything.
Yes, absolutely.
And then I also think from a parent perspective, in terms of organization, also what comes to mind for me is just your space and your homeschooling stuff, for lack of a better word, right? I could see it being very easy. Like, well, where's your workbook, or where'd those colored pencils go? Or, one kid is doing something in the other room and took some materials. And, there's lots of opportunity, I think, even from that perspective, to be organized with your space and your surroundings to help make your homeschooling experience, less stressful, because you know where everything is and it's where you need it to be.
Right. Yeah. So, for us growing up, my parents actually got us each, me and my brother, these full height desks. They were basically full height bookcases with a table surface that would fold out from them. So there was a massive amount of storage space in these things for all of our books and records and everything. And it was all right there. So I wasn't getting my stuff mixed up with my brother.
Mm-hmm.
He wasn't getting his stuff mixed up with my stuff. It was all just right there. So it definitely helps to invest in a dedicated desk or study table for each student that you're homeschooling.
Absolutely, especially if you've got a number of kids at different grade levels and things that they're working on. I could see where those materials and needs would be different. And so to have that organized is really great. I'm sure many of our listeners already know about Pinterest, but if you are not sure about how to organize the space part of it, Pinterest has a lot of great resources for homeschooling families that you can find ways to organize your home and your materials to set yourself and your kids up for success.
Right. And I know one of the benefits to homeschooling that's often touted is, and I certainly enjoyed it when I was growing up, being able to study anywhere in the house, right? Go study on the sofa or whatever. Mm-hmm. And that's great. But I still recommend having, if possible, having a room that's just dedicated to all the homeschool materials. And that's where your desks would be. Because you can always take stuff out of that room if you need to.
Yes.
But having it all stored in one place at the end of the day is extremely helpful,
right?
Instead of having stuff scattered all over the house.
Yeah, having a spot where it gets returned to.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So we've already kind of touched on this a little bit, but what are some of the consequences to parents and students if there isn't fantastic organization or you're lacking on your record keeping skills? What might happen?
Well, stuff is going to get misplaced, and if the state wants something or if it's transcript time, you're going to be rushing to find it, and you may or may not find it. Stuff does tend to go missing over the years. Mm-hmm. So it's important to your own sanity to have it all in one place, especially as the parent/teacher. You want to have an area for your own records, mm-hmm. filing cabinet, or if you're going all electronic, a computer where you can store all this stuff. Right. But someplace to put records that are specific to your own duties as parent/teacher. Mm-hmm. So that's something else is, have a spot for your students, but you also need a spot for yourself.
Yeah, that's a great point. Well, and I always know my pens go missing, and my little, one of my favorites is that the thing that erases things. What's that? Not an eraser, but the
whiteout.
Yes, those little whiteout strip things. They always go missing, and then I find them, and then the tape is pulled out. The whiteout tape. That's what it is. So yeah, having a space for all of your stuff becomes very, very important. And, again, on that daily basis, if you're missing the book that your child needs, or they're wanting to do something artistic and the markers are not where they're supposed to be, that's just time. And, people get annoyed and it's stressful. And those are things I think that we can get more control over. There's so much we can't control, but if you can always put the markers back, or the books always go in the same place, or, when you're done for the day, everything gets returned, that just makes life easier and less stressful, I think, for everybody.
Well, it's in the long run, it's going to benefit your kids as well, because they're seeing through your example, you're teaching them how to organize their lives. And those are really important skills for when they get out into the work world, because, they need to be able to organize their stuff at a job too. And when their boss comes in and asks for something, they need to be able to produce it. So it's really valuable. Not that you're being super strict about it and everything must be in its place at the end of the day. Right. Otherwise, your kids are in trouble. You obviously don't want to go overboard, but you also don't want to fall into the other ditch, which is just letting stuff go. Right.
Chaos, which I think sometimes, houses just sort of feel like that, right? And especially if you've got young kids, it's just, it feels hard for everything to get back to where it goes. So starting the way you want to end, I think, is really important with things like this. And if you're starting your homeschool journey, you might not know what you need or how to get organized. So check in with other families who are already doing this and find out what works for them. But really putting some thought into how you want to organize yourself in the beginning, I think really can help you start on the right foot.
Yes. Absolutely.
So what do you think are maybe some of the responsibilities of the parent versus the student when it comes to this organization? Because, I think we've got different responsibilities, right? We've touched on this, but does the student need to keep track of their records, or is that really more for the parent? Should the parent be the one putting stuff away, or do we want that to fall onto the student? What do you think?
Well, a lot of it depends on the age and maturity level of your kids. I think from a very early age, kids can be taught to put away their material.
Right.
But in terms of actually tracking courses completed and the grades that are earned for those courses, that's really ultimately the parent's responsibility. Now, by the time me and my brother got into high school, we were doing a lot of that record keeping ourselves, and our parents would just come and review it to make sure, we weren't giving ourselves better grades than we should have been. So as
you can't make that up, you just can't assign what you want.
Right. Unfortunately, it's not how the world works. But yeah, as your kids get older, there's no reason why they can't take on more and more responsibility for keeping their own records, regardless of whether you're doing that on paper, in a binder, or on a computer.
Yeah, I love that. And something also came to mind, that if you're noticing that you are unorganized, and to me, this comes to mind more for like your space and your materials, and it's feeling like we're always losing things, to work with your kids to figure out, what do we want and need our space to be, and why are we always having trouble finding what we want, and work together to come up with those solutions. Because like you said, you don't want it to be everything has to go back and this goes here. But I think if you collaborate with your kids and find how you want to set things up together, then they hopefully have more ownership over the process, and they're more inclined to maybe follow through with some of that organization.
Well, by doing all this too, you're helping communicate to them the importance of completing their schoolwork. Because if you're placing a high priority on being organized, on being professional about record keeping, then that's just impressing upon them, the importance of all this. And it's not just something you're doing for fun. It's not just a hobby. It's an important part of their lives right now, the learning process.
Absolutely. So you already gave some great ideas of, having a dedicated room, if you can, for your homeschooling. I love that, bookshelf/desk idea for each student. Any other thoughts on how you might organize that homeschool space? Anything that you've seen or experienced that's very helpful?
Well, keeping all the curriculum together can be very helpful. A lot of times if you're buying homeschool curriculum, there's a textbook, there's an answer key, there might be a study guide or something. And especially if you're buying ahead for future grades, sometimes that stuff gets separated. So make sure you keep all that together. Try to rubber band the textbooks with the study guides and the answer keys. So when the time comes, you know where all that stuff is. For me and my brother growing up, my folks kept a paper binder with a calendar, and that was our planner, because the computer world hadn't really quite taken off yet.
Yeah.
So that's how we would do things. We'd have a calendar showing us our week and what our assignments were for each day. And as we completed those assignments, we would just check them off on paper. And then my folks would come in after the fact and review what we had done. And that really appealed to me, because I'm more of a perfectionist and I like organizing anyway. It was less appealing to my brother, just because he enjoyed doing things with people instead of just sitting down in a book all day. So really you need to adapt your methods to the personality of your kid and his learning style. But that's easier than ever to do these days with all the technology we have available.
Yeah, absolutely. And another thing that I think is great is, like you said, if you have a dedicated space, you still can do work in other areas. So making your home sort of feel great in different ways for spaces to do work. So maybe get some beanbag chairs in a bright corner where kids can read, and maybe you've got something out on your porch where kids can do work, or you've got some little tables that fit in a closet but can easily fold out. So if they'd like to work in a different location, you've got so many options when you are homeschooling your kids to make sure that you've got kind of those setups available so that they're not kind of glued to that one desk all day, every day.
Exactly. And if they are going to be around like that, an idea I've seen that we never tried, but I'd like to try with my own kids one day, is having a whiteboard set up in kind of a central location. And each day you copy onto the whiteboard like the chores for the day and the school assignments. And then the kids, this works especially when they're younger. They can come and they can check stuff off as they complete it, or maybe you have a chart with stars or something, and they can earn stars for completing their chores and their school assignments. So those are some ideas to kind of make it more fun.
Yeah, and I think that's a great point too, is that sort of the organization doesn't just have to be kind of the homeschooling side of it. It might be kind of the overall, here's your day sort of picture, because as we know, there's flexibility in how things go, right? So unlike a traditional school, it's not starting at early in the morning or going to mid-afternoon. You can work in your chores, or maybe there's activity that you want your kids to get. You want them to play outside or, read, whatever it might be. So you can integrate all of those different pieces for kind of life and school in one place. And I love a good whiteboard. So I think that's a great idea. Mm-hmm. So obviously, these records are hugely important, and we've talked about, making sure you are keeping good records, keeping them in a binder, having a space for your own material that as your kids get older, they can be involved in some of that record keeping. But how might technology help keep you organized or help with record keeping, and especially with transcripts, which, as we know, are so important as your kids wrap up their high school experience?
Yeah, they are very important. Well, nowadays, there's great technology out there to help with record keeping. I mean, a lot of private and public schools use school information systems to track, the academics, the billing, the transcripts at their schools. And those are great for private public schools. For homeschoolers, there actually are tools online that sort of mimic that same behavior. They'll have like a record keeping component where you can actually plan out your school year in advance, and your students can mark off their work as you go along. So that's stuff that wasn't available when my brother and I were in school. So that's definitely something to look at. Even something as simple as an online spreadsheet, using Google Docs. You can set up something very similar to the binder that we used. Right. And you can share it with multiple people. So those are good things to look into, depending on how you want to work things. Some people still prefer paper, and that's fine. Yeah. Just figure something that works well for you and that you're going to use consistently. But yeah, when it comes to transcripts, it's super critical when your kid hits high school to keep track of the courses that they've completed and the grades, and the number of credits for each course, because that's all information that you're going to need for the transcript. And if your student wants to attend college, skipping the transcript is not an option. So you need to make sure you have all that data, and it's really a good idea to track that as your student progresses through high school. Right. So what a lot of our customers do is use their Transcript Maker account to do that. So they'll sign up freshman year, they'll enter their students' courses and credits and grades in for that year, and they'll just keep doing that as their student moves through high school. So then by the time they're ready to start applying to colleges, they have a transcript there that's ready to go. They just log in, print it, and they're done. That's a much better situation to be in than trying to pull all this together at the last minute, because odds are you're already going to be under pressure completing this college application, or working with your student to do that. And the last thing you're going to feel like doing is trying to remember what courses they took in high school. Right. And trying to build a transcript at the last minute can be very tricky.
Absolutely. And the great thing is that Transcript Maker can help make that as easy as possible, regardless of when they start this process. But like we said, in the effort of keeping organized and on top of things, it really is better to do that as you go. And if we have any, parents of sophomores and juniors, don't panic, you can start now, but it's great to be able to go back now as a sophomore and a junior and put those in, rather than, well, I didn't do it, I'll just do it when we get there.
Right.
It's better to do as much as you can now and then continue on.
We still get phone calls and emails occasionally from folks who say, this transcript is due in 3 days. Oh my gosh. And I'm just starting. I feel terrible for them. I don't want anyone to be in that position. So even if you're just tracking this stuff on your own using an online spreadsheet or paper, start early. I think that's the most important tip.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that's a great final tip to wrap us up today for tips and tricks for record keeping and organization is to start early. And like we said, to kind of start how you want to end. If you know you need a good looking transcript at the end of things, start that way now. How do you set yourself up for that? If you want to, not be searching for your books every day and kids running around the house, not knowing, where their things are, set up your workstation. There's lots of things you can do just to make your life easier when it comes to being organized and with your record keeping.
Yes, exactly.
Well, thank you so much, Matt. This was a great conversation.
All right. Thank you, Sarah.
You're now prepared with more ways to keep you organized, both in your record keeping and in your day-to-day space for when you are homeschooling your family. So hopefully you've got some good actionable tips that you can go out and try. And if you're ready to get your transcript a little bit more organized, we do have a 2-week free trial for you. So check that out. And if you'd like more tips, ideas, blog posts, and podcasts delivered directly to you, you can sign up for our newsletter.